guys, welcome back to another episode of Selah. I'm your host, Ishimwe Vestine. I thank you all for coming in and tuning in and clicking on this video. So I just want to thank all of you who are here, all of you who have clicked on this video and who are tuning in from behind your screens. I thank God for the opportunity truly to just sit and talk about his word and to sit and just really be able to share in a moment of pondering, a moment of revelation, and a moment of reflection. So thank y'all. Welcome to this next moment of Selah, this next Selah moment that I wanted to share with you guys. So without further ado, I just wanted to get straight into what I've been reflecting on this week. So I've been thinking, right, because sometimes something that I realized that is kind of crazy and kind of interesting that I came across this week was that in the church, we talk about submission a lot. We talk about submission between a husband and wife. We talk about submission between an authoritative figure, maybe at work or whatever field that you may work in. And I was just pondering on that, like, what actually is submission? Because not only am I at the age of thinking about a husband, guys, but I'm at the age of also trying to mature spiritually and mature mentally in the sense of how I look at certain terms that we use on a day-to-day basis and that we use in very serious conversations when we're talking about things of that should be taken with heaviness, with weight. And so when we're talking about marriage, we talk about submission a lot. And I'm just like, okay, what even is submission? Not just in marriage, but in in our faith, like in a Christian's walk, in a Christian's faith, and all of that. And so when I was thinking about it, I was like, we've never really went into depth about it. We kind of say it, like we just kind of speak it and we talk about submission, but we never really go into depth about what it is and what it entails, really. And so this week, I was kind of pondering on what that is and kind of like deep diving. And my friends know because I was calling each and every single one of them, asking them questions, telling them, what I've learned, because I was really deep diving into this submission word and what it means. And I came across something very interesting because I always thought that submission was saying yes, was kind of saying yes or agreeing to, regardless of how you feel about it, regardless of how it impacts you. It's kind of like saying yes and abiding to the rule that is above you or abiding to the authority that is above you, regardless of how you feel. But God doesn't just look for obedience. This is something that I realized is that God doesn't just look for obedience, but he also looks for trust. He looks for trust because obedience without surrender is heavy and burdening. We aren't meant to carry God as if he's a burden. And so I was like, whenever I was studying the word submission and I was looking up like blogs and looking at certain things that people wrote or like commentaries that people wrote on these certain verses, they always have that word surrender in there, or a sense of that word, or maybe a synonym of that word surrender in there. And I realized that every time you see submission, true submission isn't true submission without surrender first. And I was like, that's interesting because we talk about submission, but we don't talk about surrender. And that's why a lot of us, we get that thought of every time we think about submission, we think of it as we think of it in the sense of like saying yes and obeying your authority, obeying the person that is above you, obeying the person that is your head in the sense of marriage, obeying the person that is in authority in the sense of work. But I was thinking about it and I'm just like, God doesn't just ask for obedience, because if you just obey and do all the things of God and do all the things that he's asking you to do, you don't have true surrender. You don't have true trust in him. You're just doing it out of obligation or out of duty. Right? Cool. And so I wanted to read this passage before I move on to the definitions of surrender and submission. And that is in Luke 22:39-46. Just read that. Let's read that. The thing is, I be marking where I gotta go in my Bible, but every time I get to actually reading, not that this is relevant, but every time I get to reading it, I'll be acting like I don't know where the books of the Bible are. Like, what the heck? Anyways, so Luke 22, verses 39-46. And we're going to go ahead and read that. So It says, coming out, we went to the Mount of Olives, as he was accustomed, and his disciples also followed him. When he came to the place, he said to them, pray that you may not enter into temptation. And he has withdrawn from them about a stone's throw, and he knelt down and prayed, saying, Father, if it is your will, take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. We're going to 40. Oh, we're going to go to 46. Then an angel appeared to him from heaven, strengthening him. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly. Then his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. When he arose up from prayer and he had come to his disciples, he found them sleeping from sorrow. And he said to them, why do you sleep? Rise up and pray, lest you enter into temptation. Amen. So I know this kind of sounds irrelevant because, we're talking about the story of Jesus and the story of him going to the to the Garden of Gethsemane and praying and pleading with God about, what is to come, which was about to be his crucifixion on Calvary. But this story came up to me, or it didn't come up to me, but it came out to me when I was reading these commentaries about surrender and submission. So I just wanted to read it. And before I elaborate on that story, I wanted to do and speak on the definitions of these two words before we move any further. So the definition of submission is an external obedience. That's the overall definition that I received from it. It's that it is an external obedience. And the actual definition from, the dictionary is the action or fact of accepting or yielding to a superior force or to the will or authority of another person. This is a conscious, often dutiful yielding. It's doing what is required. So in a sense, you can submit without really understanding the reason why you're submitting. You can submit without really understanding what it is you're submitting to. You can submit without understanding what the essence of why you're doing it, right? Because it's the action of yielding to the authority. It's the action of obeying. It's the action of doing the things that they've sent you to do or called you to do or asked you to do. That's what submission is the action of, or the fact of you doing the things, right? And submission is an everyday choice or action of doing the works, in a sense. So when I thought of it, I was thinking of it as like doing the things, like the works. When we think about faith and works, it's kind of the works part of faith where you're doing the things. It's the evidence. It's the outward evidence. It's the external obedience. That's what submission is. And so the definition of surrender is an internal trust. An internal trust. And the definition from the dictionary is an unconscious cease of resistance or release of control and inward acceptance. So this is an internal trust. So surrender happens on the inside and submission happens on the outside. And so if you think about it, if submission is the outward evidence, then it has to be evidence of something. And so the reason why these two words seem to tie every time I think about it is because for it to be an outward evidence of something, it has to be evidence of something. So something had to already have formed on the inside for it to be evident on the outside. And so when you think about it, if surrender is the inward trust, then submission is the outward evidence of that surrender. Yeah, I didn't even put that together when I was talking. But yeah. Surrender is the inward not form, but it's the inward posture of the heart. It's the inward posture of the heart. It's the things that people don't see. It's the things that people don't see. It's the surrender and the letting go that you've already done before you even go and do the things, before you even go and say the things and what you have, whatever, right? So, a good example of this that I was thinking about is, as we know, sometimes touch on my experience as a soldier and my experience of going through training and things like that. And so, I was thinking about an example of an army, or um, or as like an army going to battle, right? I think of it as when we think about surrender in the terms of battle or an army, you would think that that's like in the sense of giving up or giving into the enemy or allowing yourself to be captured or throwing your hands up and saying, I surrender, or waving the white flag, right? That's what you would think about when you think about surrender or an enemy surrendering, right? Or army surrendering, sorry, an army surrendering. But in combat, a soldier doesn't see the full battlefield. So we operate with limited intel, trusting the higher command to direct us. So when I think about surrender in the sense of an army, I'm not thinking about just or not surrender, but submission and surrender. I'm not thinking about just like giving into the enemy, because if we put those two together, we're not just talking about us versus the enemy, but just looking inwardly between the army itself, that army that's going to battle. I'm thinking about it in terms of like me and the person that I'm submitted under would be my the person that I'm a subordinate to, which would be my commander or my first sergeant or whatever the case may be. And so whenever we're going into the battlefield, we operate on limited knowledge. We operate on what the commander gives us or tells us, and we trust that he sees the full battlefield and he has a plan on who should be where and what should be going on, because they see the full picture. So when we're out in the field, when we go out into the field, we're not going to see the full picture. We're just seeing the now and then. And so we go out there trusting the people who are leading us and giving us the commands like, hey, move this much steps here and go there and settle there and make a whatever, right? And so submission would be following the order, but surrender would be trusting the order makes sense even if it doesn't to you. So when we follow the order, that is submission. We are adhering to the authority above us. But when we surrender, we're trusting that that order is going to get us a win, because we trust that the commander has the best interest, our country's best interest, our army's best interest at heart. So we trust that the order is making sense regardless of whether it actually makes sense. Because sometimes we be doing things that don't make sense right then and there. And then later on in the big picture, it makes sense. I don't know if I just rambled, but that made sense to me, guys. I don't know about y'all, but that made sense to me, right? But as a soldier, you don't need the full plan to move. Most times you won't even have any of it. And so with your surrender gives you the ability to move without the full plan. It gives you the ability to take a step even if you don't have anything backing it up. It gives you the ability on to take a step even if you don't know what is going on, why am I doing this. It's like a child obeying their parents um rules and laws without fully understanding it or even agreeing with it, right? And so when it's kind of like Proverbs 3:5, right? Proverbs 3:5, which says to not lead on your own understanding. And whenever you're in surrender, when you're fully surrendered to God, you do not lean on your own understanding, because you've surrendered your will to God. You've surrendered your emotions to God. You've surrendered your mind, your thinking, your ability, everything, your strength, everything is surrendered to God. Now, once you've surrendered internally, you've made that decision, the decision to surrender, and then the submission, you will see it outwardly, because surrender is the roots that people don't see, but submission is the fruits that they do. Surrender is the roots, and submission is the fruit that they do see. It's the evidence and it's the action of the surrender, if that makes sense, right? And so, with the story that we read in Luke, right, Jesus had an internal surrender in the Garden of Gethsemane before he had an external submission on the cross in Calvary. So, I think when we read the story of Jesus at Gethsemane, that was the first part of it. And I wanted to read that first because it allows us to see what surrender looks like. Because we know that Jesus came on earth to truly show us the to show us the way, to show us the blueprint on how to do things, to show us how we're supposed to move, how we're supposed to operate in every circumstance, and to also show us that he's not a high priest that does not understand what we've been through. And so when he has shown us how hard it is to actually come to the point of surrender, in Gethsemane, he showed us the agony and the sorrow he was in when he went to the when he went not this is not even when he went to the cross. I don't know why I closed this, but this isn't even when he went to the cross. This is before he went to the cross. This is when he went up to pray in the garden where he usually prayed. And it tells us that, like, he said, "Father, if it is your will, take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done." Not just that phrase, but it also shows us here that the angel had to come and strengthen him because he was in so much agony. He prayed earnestly that his sweat turned into blood. His sweat turned into blood. He was wrestling internally to reach that full surrender before he went on the cross, right? And so we see the surrender, because the surrender is the internal decision, right? And so when I was talking to my friend about this, he had asked me, he said, okay, so what if somebody was to come up to you and put a gun to your head, right? Would and you put your hands up, right? Wouldn't putting your hands up be the surrender? And I said, technically, no. The hands up is just your show of surrender. That hands up is submission to the person who has the gun pointed at you, right? Because the putting your hands up, inside you've already decided, I'm defeated. Inside you've already decided, hey, I can't beat him. I'm I have no power here. Right? I have no power here and I can't do anything. And so your hands go up to show not yourself, but also the person that you can't do it. Like, you got it. You got it, big dog, right? So you put your hands up. And so I think that the hands up, going up, is the sign of the surrender, the choice of surrender that you've already made internally, right? And so, in the sense of surrender, I think in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus had made that decision to surrender to God's will. Even in here, when we read it, it said that, not my will. He said, if it is your will, take the cup from me. But nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. There he made the choice. He was wrestling with it, but he made the choice to surrender, right? Then the action of surrender was the cross on Calvary. So we see here that not only did Jesus show us agony in in coming to that full surrender, but I think I see it a lot in my life, y'all. Because surrender is actually hard. It's truly hard. Jesus not only demonstrated how hard it was, but he also showed how it can be done, because Jesus showed us that surrender happens in prayer, whether it's a loud prayer, whether it's a silent prayer, whether it's an internal prayer. But Jesus showed us that surrender happens in the presence of God. Surrender happens to God, because when you're surrendering to something, you're allowing it to take control. It's you giving something outside of yourself control. And so we see that Jesus said, we see that when Jesus said, not my will, but your will be done, meaning I'm letting go of any authority, any control, any type of anything that I may have here, any control, any authority that I may have in this situation. I'm giving it to you. And so we know that surrender happens in the presence of God, because when you're giving God control, you're surrendering to his will and you're letting go of yours so you can, I guess, adhere to his, right? Internally. This is happening internally, because it's not that the will that he was taking in was going to happen right there at the Garden of Gethsemane. This is something that he had to do prior to going and doing the public declaration of the surrender that he already did. It said that he humbled himself, and he did not think himself, I guess, too high. I can't remember the verse, but it says he humbled himself to abide and to be obedient to the point of death. He humbled himself to get to the point of death. He didn't think himself too worthy. Like, he let go of his divinity, the authority that he had. He let go of that because he was obedient all the way to the point of death. So here he's showing us the process of surrender, I guess you may say. He's showing us the process of surrender that happens before the outward show of it, right? And so I wanted to read the second part of Jesus's walk here at the end of his life, because we see the part of surrender where he's fighting with himself, fighting with his flesh, because his flesh didn't want to do it. His flesh wanted the cup to pass from him. His flesh wanted to abide to his will. His flesh wanted to abide to the things in which wasn't as hard as what he knew was about to come. So his flesh, of course, did not want to do it. Somebody tells me you're finna die tomorrow and you have to die tomorrow. I'm gonna try and fight it, like plead with God, like, God, please, can I not? Like, is there a different way that we can do it? Like, is there a different way to go about it? I don't know. But he showed us the battle that he had with himself. He showed us the battle that he had with this idea, this idea of him about to die in a couple of days. Like, he showed us that at the Garden of Gethsemane. And actually, if I'm being honest with y'all, I always hear the word Gethsemane. I always hear Calvary and Golgotha, which is Gethsemane in a different word. No, is it Gethsemane? No, it's Calvary in a different word, in a different language. But I always hear those three, but I always thought they were just different languages of Calvary, or like the where Jesus died. But I keep forgetting that Gethsemane was the garden in which he prayed, not the place which he got crucified. So I low-key had to do some research for that one. I didn't know, okay? But here I was reading, I was like, Gethsemane happened first for a reason. Because he truly could have just he could have just like decided to abide by the will of God and just, you know, just went and died, because he knew it had to be done regardless, right? But he went into prayer, pleading. And then at the end of his prayer, it said, not my will, but your will be done. That's surrender. And that happened in the place of prayer. So this is a spiritual surrender. This is something, because we know that our prayer is supposed to be in truth and in spirit. And so we know that when he was praying in spirit. So this is a surrender that happened inwardly. This is a surrender that happened internally. This is a surrender that happened spiritually before it could be demonstrated outwardly, right? And so let us go into the story of him on Calvary, on Calvary, which is in Calvary. We didn't read it yet. We read Gethsemane. Luke chapter 20. I don't know why I keep closing the Bible, because then I'm going to get lost trying to find it again. Here. It's in Luke chapter 23, which is the chapter after Luke chapter 23, verse 44. It says, now it was on the 6th hour, and there was darkness over all of the earth until the 9th hour. Then the sun was darkened, and the veil of the temple was torn in two. And when Jesus had cried out with a loud voice, he said, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Having said this, he breathed his last. We see that Jesus finally, this is where, because he spoke to the Father first, and he said, Father, this is a cup that I know that has to come, but if it is your will, if you're able to, please let it pass from me. Let it pass me, please. I beg of you. But he said, in the midst of his prayer, in the same sentence actually, it was divided by a comma. So it wasn't that he waited for God to reply, but in the comma he said, I'm asking and petitioning for this. But nevertheless, if it's not my will, let your will be done. He surrendered in spirit, as I said before. And then on the cross in Calvary, coming from Gethsemane, the chapter before, in Calvary, you see the submission, which is the fruits, the evidence, the action of the surrender. The action of that surrender was him receiving the cup and taking in the cup and taking his last breath and saying, God, I commit my spirit to you. I'm giving you my spirit. I'm submitting under you. And this is the action of submitting to an authority. This is the action of submitting to an authority, as we know that that's the definition of submission. And so when I was thinking about this in the sense of a marriage, right? Because that's where I started off, because we're getting into this big grown age, right? In the sense of a marriage, right? A man is the head of the house, and he is led by God, right? He is under authority of God. So he submits under God, which means he has to be fully surrendered for him to fully, truly submit to God. Because if he's just submitted under God but hasn't surrendered, he's just doing the things in which he expects or thinks is what submission is. But if he, unless he surrenders like Jesus did on Gethsemane, and allowing God to truly take control, not my will, but your will be done, then the submission will come from a place of surrender, the heart posture of surrender, because submission is the outward evidence of the heart posture of surrender. And so the man is submitted under God, which means he's fully surrendered to God's will. And that pours onto the woman who is submitted under the man. And she is fully surrendered to the man. Means not my will, but your will be done. But not just the man's will, but God's will. Because if it's a chain, it means God is covering not just the man, but everyone under him, meaning we're submitting to God's will, right? Because if I'm submitting to the man's will, it means I'm inevitably submitting to God's will, because he submitted to God's will. I feel like I just did a whole roller coaster there. But if the man is submitted under God's will, that means my leader is God through my husband. Yes, that's good. My leader is God through my husband. And my husband is the head of my household earthly. But spiritually, God is the head of my household. But for me, if I say I submit to my husband and I'm doing the things of submission, let's say he makes the decision of what we're about to do in the next 2 years or whatever, or how we're gonna raise our kids, and I'm just like, okay, that's fine. But I truly haven't surrendered to it. Somewhere down the line, that heart posture that wasn't fully surrendered is gonna come out. You're gonna see it, even though you were doing the things of submission. Oh, she's a submissive woman. But if her heart is not truly surrendered to the spirit that is leading her, she's not fully submitted. The submission is just an action, and you can fake actions. You can't fake a heart posture. You can fake actions, but you cannot fake a heart posture. So submission can be faked, but surrender cannot. Surrender has to come from a true place in your heart, a true position of your heart that is surrendered to the spirit leading you. And so we talk about submission, submission, submission. And like I said, I used to think it was just like saying yes and submitting to your husband and yes, you got it, and truly I didn't think of the depth that it has, because if I'm just submitting to him, it's an act. If I'm just doing the things of submission, it's an act. It can be performed, it can be faked, it can be rehearsed. You can rehearse it and do it so many times that you don't even realize that it's just second nature. But true surrender, and that is why, so a woman, I feel like a woman is naturally submissive. A woman is naturally submissive because we're naturally supposed to be helpers, right? We're naturally meant to be submissive. And so when the spirit that is leading you has the spirit of God, we're naturally submissive to the spirit of God. We're naturally submissive to the spirit that is leading us, if the spirit is leading us correctly, right? Because we're like children, we're like sponges, we take everything in. At least me, let me speak about myself. I naturally take things in. I'm like, I observe the things that come. If you give me energy, I will take it in and sometimes give it back to you. I'm working on not doing that, but I will sometimes give it back to you. And it will be, that's just, I take it in, right? And so as a woman, we naturally submit to what we're getting. We naturally become, or not become, but like, we adhere to what it is that we're receiving. And so for a woman, as the helper that we were created to be, we help the person, because we were saying here to help the man. And so the man was already by nature our authority, because let's say like our hand, right, is here to is on our body to help us, is on our body to help us grab things, help us move things, help us do things, right? But my hand is submitted to me. My hand is submitted to my mind. If my hand was placed on my body to help me, it's naturally already submitted to me. It can't do anything, can't have a will of its own, just doing whatever when I didn't send it to do that, right? So as a helper, as a woman, we naturally was made and created to submit under the body that we have been put on, right? As the hand does. And so the reason why submission seems to us as just saying yes, saying yes, saying yes, saying yes to the things that we receive and to receive outwardly is because that's kind of how submission is shown to us, or it was preached to us, right? And so when we think deeper and we think about it deeper, because submission can't just be the things that you do. Submission has to be an internal position of the heart. It has to be an internal position of the heart that happens first. And so when you have submission happen before surrender, submission becomes heavy. It becomes a load. It becomes obligation. It becomes duty. It becomes doing it because you feel like you have to. And so when we are submitting to God out of duty and out of obligation, it seems like we're carrying him as a weight, because somewhere down the line, we're going to get tired of performing. We're going to get tired of performing and acting like, "Oh God, I am surrendered to your will because I'm doing A, B, and C." It's like fruits and works, right? Not fruits and works, faith and works. The Bible says that work without faith is dead, or faith without works is dead, right? Faith without works is dead. But also works without faith is just I don't know what that is. It's just works. You're just doing things. But faith without works is dead. And so the faith happens inwardly. This is something that happens internally in your heart. You decide to have faith in your heart. But faith without works faith the faith is like surrender. So when you have surrender without submission, it's just surrender that hasn't been walked out yet. When you have submission without surrender, it's just performance. And so when you have faith without works, you're just saying and proclaiming, I believe in God, I have faith. But when you're put in a predicament to show that faith, you can't. There's no steps to your faith. There's nothing that proves that your faith is real. So when you don't have the works, of course, when you have surrender, but you don't have the outward submission, that's why submission is so important, because it shows the other person that you're truly one with them, right? You're one with them, and you understand the position that they hold in the household, the position that they hold in the workplace, or whatever the case may be. You understand and you respect it, right? And so when you have submission without surrender, you're just carrying a load of doing all the things. People who work like the Pharisees and Sadducees that Jesus called hypocrites, they were just doing the things. They were doing the things. And we saw that when it came to actually show their faith. I think there's a Bible verse where it says, "Show me your faith and I'll show you my works," or "Show me your works and I'll show you my faith." And it's like when you have them two separately, that's not they can't work separately. Submission and surrender cannot work separately. The same way faith and works cannot work separately. It's evidence of. So faith happens inwardly, and works is the evidence of the faith. Like fruits is the evidence of the faith. And so surrender happens inwardly, and submission is the fruits and the evidence of the surrender. I just went on a ramble, but I hope that made sense, because every time I say it back to myself, it makes sense. But when I say it out loud, I feel like it doesn't make sense. So please, in the comments, let me know if that made sense. If it didn't, we'll chat about it in the comments, because for me, it made sense. But then again, I'm a rambler, so I don't know. I just be seeing things differently. But to me, it made sense. But here we see that um, surrender happened in prayer, where Jesus suffered spiritually and emotionally, was in agony to the point where his sweat turned into blood, y'all. So he was wrestling with himself. And like I said earlier, I really relate to this, because for me, whenever it's like it comes to actually surrendering to God, um, it's hard. It's hard. I be I be tussling with myself. It's a hard thing to do, because we are human beings and we have a will of our own. I think the fact that we do have a will of our own makes it so hard to submit to another will, to submit to a separate will, to submit to a different will. Because we have a will of our own, we have our own desires, we have our own thoughts, we have our own plans and things. That's what makes it so hard to submit to another will. As you saw, Jesus' spirit and his flesh was wrestling with each other. And the Bible tells us that the flesh and the spirit is constantly at war. We see a tug of war in this passage with Jesus. His flesh wants the cup to pass. His spirit wants God's will to be done. And I personally wrestle with that. I be wrestling with that. And I'm like, Jesus, like God, like I really want to do this, but like, I really want to do this. It takes a minute to get to the point where it's like, not my will, but your will be done. But it's like the battle of surrender inward, because it's an inward battle, and that's what makes it so hard, because you are fighting with the spirit in spirit. Yeah, you're fighting and wrestling with the spirit in spirit. And so the wrestle of surrender is truly hard. And I personally, when I think about this story, I'm like, Jesus wrestled with surrender to the point of where his sweat turned to blood. Me, I just be struggling in my room saying, do I want to go to this place? Do I not want to go to this place? I'm wrestling with that. But Jesus wrestled to the point where his sweat turned to blood. I was actually amazed by that. His sweat turned to blood. This is how you know how hard the flesh and the spirit be wrestling, because surrender is not an easy thing, and God didn't intend for it to be an easy thing, because it's a hard fought. Hard fought. Hallelujah. It's a hard fought. Jesus, I trust you. It's a hard fought. You can have it, God. It's a hard fought, not my will, but your will be done. It's a hard fought yes. Though it's a yes, because like I said, submission is looked at as saying yes, regardless of how you feel, saying yes, saying yes, saying yes. But surrender is a hard fought yes. Internally, like in the spirit, you're fighting flesh, spirit, internally fighting and wrestling and tugging to say yes. And then submission, you see it outwardly, because once you make a decision in your heart, once your heart has a posture, your actions and the outside has no choice but to abide by the surrender in which happened inside. So once I have a heart posture, and that's why God works, God looks for a transformation, and surrender is the transformation. And transformation has to happen inside before it happens outside. If it happens outside and the inside hasn't been changed, again, that's performance. And so God wants a transformation. He doesn't just want obedience. He wants a transformation of heart. And so when we talk about surrender, surrender is that transformation of heart. Though my heart wants and desires this certain thing, God wants to transform it to desire the things that he desires. He wants to transform it to reflect his heart. And he wants, what is it, the Bible verse that says, I will cut out your heart of stone and give you a new heart. It's transformation. He wants not just to even transform it, he wants to give you a new one. Something inside has to happen first. And that's why Jesus came and he told us in the Beatitudes that everything derives from the heart. Everything happens inside first. Everything must take place inside first before it comes outside. He said, Moses told you that lusting is a sin and you've committed adultery. But I tell you that even if you look at a woman with lustful eyes, you have already committed adultery. Even if you look at a woman with lustful eyes, because it's not just when you do the act of adultery, it's when the adultery and the act of adultery happens in your heart first. The same way that in Genesis 1, God created man and woman in spirit. Because then in chapter 2, he created them outwardly in the physical. Everything happens in the spirit first. Everything happens inside first. And so when the heart posture is positioned a certain way inside, then it will be evident on the outside. When a heart posture is positioned inside, the evidence will show on the outside. Regardless of how you put it, it's going to be shown outside. And so if we see the Pharisees, right? They did the outside transformation before they did the inside transformation. And that's why God called them hypocrites, because you're saying all these things and performing all these things, but your heart is still of stone. You haven't even allowed God to change and transform your heart from the inside, but you're acting as if your heart has been transformed. You're acting and doing the things of submission, but you haven't surrendered to God's will yet. You have not surrendered yet. Submission without surrender is performance. It's performance. It's just for show. You're just doing the things. Somebody can go to church. Somebody can pray. Somebody can read their Bible. Somebody can spend hours praying, but their hearts hasn't been transformed yet. Their heart posture hasn't been moved yet. Hasn't been transformed yet. That's the things of the Pharisees, the things that the Pharisees was doing that Jesus called them out on. You can't just go to church and say and proclaim the name of God, and you haven't had that full surrender yet. You can't say that, oh, every decision that I make is of God and it's ordered by God and da 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 da, but your heart ain't surrendered yet. So everything has to happen in Gethsemane first. It has to happen in Gethsemane before you go to Calvary. He doesn't just tell us to pick up our cross. He doesn't just tell us to pick up our cross. You can't just go and just pick up your cross. That's it. No, you have to die to yourself first. You can't crucify something that isn't dead. You can't crucify something that isn't dead. You can't bring a sacrifice that isn't dead. So when God tells us to pick up our cross, before you even get to the point of picking up your cross, you should already be dead. You should already be dead before you go and say, God, I'm picking up my cross. Die first and then pick up your cross, because you're on your way to Calvary. But before Calvary happens, Gethsemane has to happen first. Gethsemane has to happen before Calvary happens. You can't make your way to Calvary before you've even went and prayed. Jesus, you can't go to Calvary before you have went to Gethsemane. My God, you cannot. And a lot of us wrestle with this. And like I said, surrender is not easy. So Gethsemane is going to be a hard fought Gethsemane, guys. It's going to be hard fought. I promise you, it's going to be hard fought because our will wants a say. Our will always wants a say. But we always have to get to the point that we say, as Jesus did, not my will, but your will be done, God. Not my will, but your will be done. And surrender means you're giving control, not just inwardly, but allowing your actions to pour outwardly. Out of your belly will flow rivers. It will flow from the abundance of your heart. It will flow, meaning your heart has to be postured a certain way for it to outpour a certain thing, for it to outpour the submission. It has to already be positioned in surrender. It has to be positioned in Gethsemane before you go and try to go to Calvary, guys. Before we try to go to Calvary, let us go to Gethsemane first in the presence of God and actually truly, truly seek that surrender and ask God even to strengthen us, because even here it showed us that the angel came and strengthened him. The angel came and strengthened him. That shows us how strong that tug of war was, guys. God, send us angels to strengthen us for real, because that tug of war be really tugging. It'd be tugging and it'd be warring for sure. So truly, guys, I just wanted to encourage you guys and encourage us to truly just seek that surrender. Seek that surrender before we pray for submission. Seek the surrender before we pray for submission. We have to die before we pick up our cross. We have to die. And we're not just dying for no reason. We're dying for God. We're dying for God, which means we are surrendering to him and his will before we go to the cross, before we pick up our cross and go to crucify ourselves and share in his death. We can't share in his resurrection until we share in his death. We have to die first, pick up our cross, crucify our flesh, and then share in his resurrection. There are steps. There's a process to be followed, guys. There's a process to be followed. You must die, pick up your cross, crucify your flesh, and then resurrect with Jesus Christ. Amen. But just I wanted to encourage everyone just to remember that surrender has to come first before we find ourselves in a performative, burdening act, before we find ourselves in a burdening state, because it will become burdening to try to uphold the submission without true surrender. It will become burdening, it will become heavy to try to uphold submission without surrender. It's hard because your heart isn't in it. So you're just doing the things without your heart being in it. It's hard. And so truly I pray and I pray and I pray that we may be able to go and receive the strength to ask God to really strengthen us as he strengthened Jesus in Gethsemane, to come to that full surrender with him, to come to that full surrender that he asks for. Because truly God is hard. This thing that you're asking us is hard. But we will prevail in the strength of Jesus Christ, because we don't do anything on our own. And truly, I pray that we all may be able to ask God to give us strength of Proverbs 3:5, that we may not lean on our own understanding, but we may be able to submit everything that we do by heart, by physical, by emotional, by mental to God, that we may be able to submit and surrender everything to God. In anything that we do, and to not lean on our own understanding, because that's what really leads us astray, because our understanding is flawed. We don't know everything. We don't see the full battlefield. And so if we don't see the full battlefield and we lean on our own like eyes and peripheral vision, we're going to be led astray. So we have to trust the person who sees the whole battlefield and can be able to give us the commands to go left or right or move straight, this far, this long, stay, still, stay. We have to be able to trust the person that can see everything to be able to give us those commands. But yeah, so that leads us to our Selah question of the day. I know y'all been waiting for that one because this yap session, it can go all day. I could really go all day, but we have to end this episode at some point. So that leads us to our Selah question. And our Selah question for today is, where am I obeying God but still holding back? Where am I obeying God but still holding on to some level, some type of control that I haven't given to God yet? Where am I holding back or holding on to that I haven't given to God yet? In what area of my life, whether that's finances, whether that's education, whether that's my relationships with people, my friendships, whether that's my day-to-day life, the things that I've placed in priority, whether that's priorities or my plans for the next 5 years. Because if you're like me, you have your plans for the next 15 years. But whether that's your plans, what part of your life, what area of your life are you still holding on to control of, even though you're obeying God but holding back? Where is it in your life that you're obeying God but still holding back on? Truly, that I really encourage us to reflect on that and reflect on every single area, and also ask God to really open up your heart and perform surgery to show you those things, to show you those aspects of your life that you are holding back on and not allowing God to have full control over. What areas of your life have you not surrendered to Him but you've been submitting to? What areas of your life are you not surrendering to God? But anyways, that is it from me, guys. That is it for this yap session. I just wanted to close out with that very pondering Selah question, because truly, like, it's hard because sometimes we can't see ourselves unless we have a mirror. So that's why we ask God. Um, Not sometimes, but we can't see ourselves at all if we don't have a mirror. And so that's why we have to go to somebody else. We have to go to God, who sees all, who knows us, who knew us before we were even born, and who knows the hairs on our heads. And so truly encouraging everyone to be able to go to God and ask Him to strengthen us to be able to release the things that we need to release, for Him to truly have His way and for His will to be done and not our own. But anyways, guys, that's it for me. I want to encourage everyone to like, subscribe, comment, share, repost, whatever the case may be. Share it to your grandpappies and your grandmommies. Send the video to whoever you feel like it will, help and edify. That's it for me, guys. I love you guys, but God loves you more. Bye.